10 a.m. Chair.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest executive meeting of North Northamptonshire Council, and good morning to those watching via the live stream on YouTube. Members are reminded to keep your microphones muted unless invited to speak, and if everyone could ensure their phones and their laptops are on silent, please. So we move on to item 1, apologies for absences. Are there any apologies for absences?
I've not received any, Chair.
Okay, we'll take that as a no then, thank you. So moving on to item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of December 2022. The minutes are on page 5 to 32 of the agenda pack. Are there any comments in respect to their accuracy? Good, okay. So could I have a mover, please, for the minutes? A seconder, thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much.
Chair, just to clarify, the minutes for December, this is the first time they've been here. The January minutes are coming to next week's. That will then get us back up to speed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to item 3, members' declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members on any of the items today? Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. The same declaration that I've made before, that in my other place of work I may have attended meetings where the items may have been discussed.
Thank you, Councillor Pentland. Okay, oh, sorry, Councillor Brackenbury.
No.
Oh, Councillor Lorman.
It's me. Item 9, it's a personal interest. I'm in the position of control in Sir Christopher Hatton School, which is mentioned in the development pool.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lorman. I think that's all the declarations of interest. So we move on to item 4, notifications of requests to address the meeting. So we have item 6, maintain nursery supplementary funding, Councillors McGee and Councillor Dorothy Maxwell. Item 7, general fund budget 2023-24 and MTFP, Councillor McGee. And finally, item 6, the HRA budget 2023-24 MTFP as well, Councillor Lynn Buckingham. Are there any other people to speak? David? Okay, thank you very much. So item 5, Finance and Resource Scrutiny Committee Budget Consultation Submission for 23-24. I'd like to invite Councillor Mark Pengelly to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going off the screen for the first time, so excuse me if I get a hold up, okay? Can I thank all the members of the Finance Scrutiny Committee, plus officers and the executive members who took part in this year's budget scrutiny work. The work started on this several months ago, and we spent a lot of time looking in detail at last year's in-year spend and how areas were performing before doing the more detailed scrutiny finance work, and we found this really helpful. We, the committee, fully understand the pressures all departments and the council are under in these difficult times, with high interest rates, raising fuel costs and many other uncertainties. We do believe it would be helpful if the government was to give a fixed-term spending review that would give a bit of certainty, and the Conservative-led LGA agree with this. There are many unknowns going forward, from the new homes bonus and business rates that could affect the council. We need funding based on need and an end to competition for capital costs. You can see from the report the areas that members had questions about, and can I thank the officers and the executive members for their responses. I will outline today some of the salient points. On the Trust, colleagues held several meetings with the Trust, and at first it was difficult to get details on the budget that both councillors and officers needed. Can I thank the Council's finance team and the executive member for what they've done in being able to work with the Trust so we could get more detailed information. The Trust must be reminded that this information is critical to you, the executive, and your officers in seeing how the Trust are performing and why there was a massive overspend. We need the Trust to understand this in the future. An NN Council must get on top of this overspend by the Trust and North Northants Council working together. We would like more detail on the proposed in-county facility that will ensure that those who need placements are closer to home and save the council the high cost of placing children out of county. The cost of placements out of county is out of our control, with costs sometimes up to £10,000 per week. And it's important to stress it's not good for the children and the families also. In the children's service, there is concern on the home-to-school transport costs. We understand this was recently disaggregated, so we have more control now at North Northants Council. But we believe there should be a 6-month review by the Finance Scrutiny Committee to ensure we're getting on top of this. We are also concerned about the time it gets to send assessments. This does not help the customer and can be costly. Officers have advised this is in hand, and we need to keep on top of this. Officers advised they had to make a 20% savings across the board on this budget, which we felt was uncomfortable, but we realise the hard work the officers and members have put in to try to find these savings. On place and economy, members understand the fees and charges decision have been delegated to officers, but there is £227,000 extra in income expected from the people of this county, of the North of Hampshire, have to pay this year. We have asked for a copy of the new fees and charges on several occasions, and we still wait for them. Can these please be forwarded to members as soon as possible? There was concern about Legacy Council proposed income that was advised the new council would achieve, but will not. Crematoriums at Wellingborough and Kettering and Lodgebox Sports Centre, to name a few. And there's concern there could be more of these. The crematorium in Wellingborough is North Northamptonshire controlled, but it's run by an arm's length committee or trust that we cannot scrutinise. This needs looked at going forward. The new Kia contract and in-house team, these are new and finding their feet. But we are already being told by some that schemes are not going to be done when expected. We need to review this contract going forward to see if we're getting value for money. But we do understand that we've got to give it time to find its feet. The council talks about the importance of harmonisation in all areas, but on car parking we advised we need a strategy. We are looking forward to seeing the strategy, and we understand council's reliance, but we do understand the council's reliance on these fees. On enabling services, the concern for the committee on this was on page 21 of the report for the 24-25 budget gap of 18 million and the 25-26 gap of nearly 54 million, and what the council would do to minimise the effect this could have on the council. We need to start, and I'm sure we are looking at this now. There was a big debate on audit fees. Some members believed the rise in fees was in line with the industry, but concern was raised about the time of signing off accounts for legacy councils. It was noted this was the responsibility of the audit company that we used in the past. There's a big concern on the reliance of agency staff all over the council. We understand officers trying to tackle this, but we're not seeing this. We can't see this falling. The information presented on staff numbers and vacancies is really difficult for anybody to understand or members to understand. The way it is presented does not help the council with large numbers of vacancies, but when we drill down into this, some of these were seasonal, etc. We are advised this is being looked at and we will keep on top of it, which will help both the executive and officers. Adult health and partnership in housing. We understand consultation on adults and social care provision is ongoing, and we await the report. So there's not much more we want to say on that now, because we think it's only fair for that report to come forward. Concerned about money allocated for the backlog repairs. We were advised this could be increased in year, but a figure allocated at the beginning of the year for what is needed would be more helpful. There's concern about where the right to buy monies is going to be spent. We do not want to lose this, and there seems to be a slowdown on building new council homes in North Northamptonshire. There's concern about the lack of temporary accommodation, out of area accommodation being used for residents. This policy needs looked at for both costs and how it affects families. We, the members, understand the work put in by all officers and members in putting this budget together, and we trust you take on board the comments we raise, and we can work together to make North Northamptonshire a better council for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pengelly, and thank you so much for the sterling work you and your committee has done over this year in assisting us as an executive and the council as a greater body to deliver our services and be value for money, as we say. I know we have the chair of the Scrutiny Commission here, Councillor Brackenbury. I don't know if you wanted to come in at this point to say anything.
Only really to thank the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Commission and obviously officers and everyone else who participated in the scrutiny for the budget, and I think well done.
No,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. Members, do we have anything to comment on the issues that have been raised and so on? So I'll go to Councillor Edwards to start with.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pengelly, for that report. And I've just the three issues that you kind of raised within children's services, one being the trust, and I can assure you we are doing everything possible to get any information that we absolutely need to be able to hold the trust to the account to do that, particularly with the overspend. And you know, there isn't a day goes by where we talk about that and work with them to get this information. And within that, you're absolutely right about the children out-of-town placements. Not only is it financially not viable, but it's not good for the children and the families around. So we're working on that to do everything possible to bring them back into Northamptonshire as opposed to being out of town. And thank you for recognising the improvement in the SEN provision. It's not perfect, but we are getting there. We've got a huge increase in EHCPs, which we are on top of, but we need to do more, and we are doing more with that. So thank you very much for recognising those.
Thank you. Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you to the scrutiny panels for their work. I just thought I'd go through a few things in place in the economy. And as has been recognised, we only took this service over from the West at autumn half term. And of course, at that point, most of the contracts had been let because they're done in time for the September start for the whole year. However, we do have a new manager in place who's getting to grips with it, and also we will be consulting on the whole scheme in the springtime, so there will be movement there. I'm thankful for the encouragement to promote the collection of food waste, so thank you very much, and yes, and anything local councillors can do to move that on, it would be much appreciated. In regards to the estate, we have set up an asset rationalisation group with councillors, and I think under Councillor Wendy Brackenbury, and that has met and is working, and it has done site visits already, so there is a report coming on that. And we are, actively looking at the operational properties. With regard to the parking, the car parking, as has been mentioned, we have initiated a parking strategy report, and that will be commencing work this month, and that hopefully will report as soon as possible. That is all agreed. And with regard to fees and charges, they are all on the website, and they were updated on the 1st of January. There may be others to update, but they will be updated as soon as possible. They are there to see for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lorman. Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and also like to send my thanks to the scrutiny panel for the work that they have done. Just a point of clarification, really. As outlined on page 38, item 4.1, the subsidy for Chester House Estate for 23-24 of 298,000 is not actually being reduced. The creation of a heritage, tourism and culture restructure will look at savings as outlined in the final proposed budget, but this monies will go to develop and support this new service across North Northamptonshire. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor, Councillor David Brackenbury, please.
Thank you, Chair, and in concert with other members, may I thank you, Councillor Pengelly, and everybody on your committee for the hard work and interest that you've shown in everything. It shows the effectiveness of good quality scrutiny, so thank you. Just one item really, Chair. On the crematoria, Yes, indeed, there was a rebalancing of income targets for bereavement services, and naturally there is a considerable increase in utility costs, which have had to be taken into consideration. In terms of your wider point, there is also a review of governance of the Wellingborough crematorium, and I'll happily keep you updated, Councillor Pengelly, with that as it goes forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. And I just wanted to sort of come back on the bit that you raised on the Children's Trust and the costs and such. It's just worth noting that West Northants and North Northants, alongside the Children's Trust, has commissioned a piece of work to look at the most expensive 120 cases, roughly, that we have, and to begin to look to see what we can do to reduce costs. So just some reassurance for you, Councillor Pengelly. And so Councillor Harrison would like to speak.
Thank you, and thanks for your comments on adult services and public health. The comments about the retention and recruitment and retention of staff is, of course, something that is constantly on our minds, as it's not just a problem here, but nationally. But and one of the drivers behind the consultation that we've just gone through for our own provider services that you mentioned, that you'd like to scrutinise, hopefully next year or over the coming year. I can tell you that consultation has now finished, and we will be able to report back on that very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Binley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Pengelly also for the sterling work that the committee carried out. The 2 points within my area that you raised were the right to buy receipts, so I'll address that one first. That is something that this executive is very concerned about, and we keep a constant eye on it, and I certainly do as the portfolio holder. Officers are satisfied at the moment that we're on track to spend these right to buy receipts within the required timeframes. As we actually go on to item 8. Later on, there's a whole piece in there, of course, about how the rules were changed with regards to spending right to buy receipts, or the 141s, as they're called. So we are satisfied that those are going to be spent, because we certainly don't want to be giving money back to the government, especially at the base rate plus 4% compound interest. Out of area placements was the other area. I know, Chair, that I've raised this before at this committee, and we are immensely proud of the work that this council has done, along with the absolute sterling efforts of our officers. We have an excellent team. You know, we currently sit at 2 out of area placements, and I am constantly monitoring these. And when I do see them, you know, when they're in places like Northampton, you know, again, I wouldn't exactly call them too far, albeit I appreciate the impact that this can have on families and their support networks, etc. But also we have to remember that some of these people are actually placed out of area as well for safety reasons in certain instances. So I am very satisfied with what the team are doing with regards to the out of area placements. But I think it's right that we keep making sure that we do as much as we absolutely can on that front and secure enough temporary accommodation within Northamptonshire.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. So, Councillor Pengelly, over to you on this if you wanted to sum up on anything, and for you to sort of recommend this goes to full council for approval.
I think there's been a wide range of debate on what Councillor Binley said. There is this definition of what is out of area. I believe that we've got to look at Corby and Wellingborough not being in the same area. It's very difficult for somebody from Corby to get to Wellingborough and vice versa if they don't have any transport. And you're classing out of area as being outside North Northamptonshire, of course. So that's something that we have to really look at going forward, because we have to look at the effect this has on the cost to the council, and also more importantly on the families. So that's one issue. One issue that we did in that didn't come up Jason, was the £54 million going on to 3 years' time that we have to look at saving. And that is a worry to me, and I'm sure it's a worry to you as well. And that's something that we all have to start looking at, where that £54 million should come from. My view is that this is a new council, and I don't believe the government have been really fair to us as a new council. I think they should have given us more money at the beginning to start off with, and given us more of a budget, and they've let us down. That's my opinion, but I think it's been very, very difficult for our officers to get a balanced budget when they've been going on the same budget, just being crossed over from the old county. And that's my opinion. I think it's been really, really difficult, and they've done a really, really good job in working with the budgets they've got.
Thank you, Councillor Pengelly. Yeah, look, I mean, none of us are going to hide from the task that what lays ahead of us is a mammoth task. We all knew that. We all knew at the beginning of LGR where we were with this. But look, you know, we've got a very good team of officers around us. We've got a good executive model, and generally we have a very good council chamber full of people that will hold everyone to account. And I'm confident that we will bridge any of those amounts and put us on a strong trajectory going forward as well. Okay, thank you, Councillor Pengelly, for that. And with that, I think we just move on to item 6 now, which is the Maintain Nursery Supplementary Funding and the report from the Finance and Resource Scrutiny Committee. And I would like to invite Councillor John McGee to address the meeting. And Councillor McGee, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And this reminds me sitting here when the cuts to Pen Green actually came about, because on page 42 of this report, it states officers should continue to work with Pen Green given the cuts. I just want to ask the question that you actually said yourself, Chair, in one of these meetings, that you will work closely with Pen Green to identify internal and external funding to try and bridge the gaps. Because I know for certain, and I represent an area that your own government says is left behind, and we will lose our nursery in Kingswood if we don't find some way of supporting and helping Pen Green. So I'm going to ask what meetings have happened up to date now to try and help and support some of the funding gap that's going to be that I've got now and is about to come.
Okay, Councillor McGee, thank you very much. I would like to now invite Councillor Dorothy Maxwell. Councillor Dorothy Maxwell, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
In this report, which supports all 4 main nurseries, but with Pen Green still being paid more at 350 and Croyland, Rowntree and Highfield 100,000. This is a step forward from last year. Pen Green, which still gets an income from other sources, like the Children's Trust, for example, is still better off. My view last year was that all should be treated equally. However, we have kept the other 3 open, which may not have been the case. I would like to see Maintain nurseries set up in other areas, for example, Rushton, in future, which would be a step forward. I'm sure that they travel to Wellingborough, but as part of Rowan Gate in Rushton, it is the future. We would love to have more funding, but that is the future also. A quote, all children, no matter of their postcode, should receive the same level of access to good quality early years and children's care provision. We know this happens in NNC, but we hope this explains in the future other areas and other towns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Mark Pengelly again to present the report, please.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing I want to do is thank the elected members and the officers who are part of the panel put forward. Some of the names in the report weren't part of the panel. I think two of them just couldn't make any of the meetings. So there was a small team of 4 or 5 of us that looked at it with officers, and it was very, very difficult, especially for me, who lives and supports Pen Green and thinks it's a really, really good centre, and she believes it should have as much money as it should have. And the work in this was numerous. We visited every single nursery site. We met with the chairs and governors, the head teachers and other members in the schools. We had meetings with our officers, and some of them we got a bit vociferous on. We met with the schools forum, and we had a full audit report as well, and that gave us a lot of information that we'd never had before. It was surprising that we found out, well, we couldn't find a previous audit report going back years, and Anne-Marie Dodd said, look, this should be done as a norm. So this was a first, and hopefully these carry on every few years, so we have all the information to see how the schools are going. The conclusion of the report is that the Maintained Nursery Task and Finish Group support the executive decision to adopt a participation-based rate of funding for the Maintained Nursery Supplement. And the Task and Finish Group recommends the Executive Committee continue to engage with and offer support to the Maintained Nurseries in relation to all aspects of finance outside the main nursery supplement. And I do understand that Tom Pursglove has written to the Chief Executive only the other day in respect to Pen Green, and I echo what John said. I think that, and I know and I hope that the officers will look at what support we can give to Pen Green and all the other nurseries going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pengelly, and I just wanted to pick up a couple of the points there. I appreciate you live and breathe and support Pen Green, and I know this has been a challenging task for you, but I'm reassured that yourself and your committee has come to the recommendation to support the executive on this item, and I refer to the Tom Pursglove email, which actually came to myself last night late, which I've already responded to Tom Pursglove MP on that, so he would have had that response. But thank you for the great work again that you've done in your committee, and I understand it was a challenging task for you. Councillor Brackenbury, Wendy Brackenbury, did you want to make any comments as Chair of Scrutiny?
Yes, please, Chair. I'd like to thank the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, in particular those members who sat on and everyone who supported the Maintained Nurseries Supplementary Funding Scrutiny Task and Finish Group. This was a good piece of scrutiny, and the recommendations are fair for families across Northamptonshire. Not only are they fair, but they will ensure the continued sustainability of all 4 maintained nurseries. The Schools Forum, at its meeting in March 2022, agreed to move to a participation funding for allocation of the maintained nursery supplement, and these recommendations reflect this and will ensure families across Northamptonshire have fair and equitable access to our maintained nurseries. And I fully support the recommendations in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. I'm going to go to Councillor Edwards now, who's indicated that he would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pengelly, and all the group. I know that actually all 4 nurseries have appreciated you visiting as well and looking into this work. I am pleased that you acknowledge the recommendation that we made, and you do support that recommendation as a full, open and transparent and fair way of funding all 4 nurseries. Just to Councillor McGee, who asked a question about how many times, I can assure you that the officers have been into Pen Green many times over the past 9 months, and we can provide you with a full chronological, is that the word, list of when and who attended those as well. And Councillor Maxwell, the reason why the amounts are still different is because it is based on participation. So it will be that Pen Green have more children than some of the others. But absolutely, looking forward, there's no reason, providing any extra funding comes in, that we can look at other places to open maintained nurseries. Back to you, sorry, Councillor Pengelly. So as the group supported the decision of the executive have determined that the participation-based funding model will continue until such times as the Department for Education amend the conditions of grant for the dedicated schools grant. I'm glad you also acknowledged that, again, it was open and transparent about the audit. Absolutely, we will continue with that, and our officers fully support this as well. So thank you very much for all your work.
Okay, I'm just looking around the room for any other member engagements on this. No. Okay, so the recommendations are set out on page 42 of the agenda pack. Can I have a mover, please, for the recommendation? Councillor Edwards, a seconder. Councillor Howes, thank you very much. So they've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 7. I would like to invite Councillor John McGee to address... Sorry, Leader. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the words that Councillor Edwards said around the participation model moving forward, it's just so that members were clear that that was what they were voting on, and it just wasn't the motion and the recommendations that were in the report. So it may be worth just you moving that again, Councillor Edwards, and ensuring that members are clear that that is what the executive have approved.
Yeah, no problem, thank you. So, as the group support the decision of the Executive in 22 to 23, Executive have determined that the participation-based funding model will continue until such times as the Department for Education amend the conditions of grant for the dedicated schools grant.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. I think that's what we were all voting on, because you did move it and it was seconded by Councillor Howes, but I think we've got that double clear. Would you require another vote, Monitoring Officer? Yeah, can we just have another show of hands in favour of that, please? Thank you very much. Got to keep the Monitoring Officer happy. So we now move, yeah, absolutely. We now move on to item 7, General Fund Budget 2023-24 and Medium Term Financial Plan. And again, welcome Councillor McGee to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Councillor Scott for his offer to send me that list, and can that list also say what the discussions were about? If it was about help to find external funding, etc., that would be most helpful. Thank you. Chair, I'm going to be very brief on 07 because we as councillors do have a full council coming up to discuss the whole of the budget, and there were many issues raised there. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, if I may, Chair, because I'm more concerned about the ongoing budgets in the years to come. I think we could end up like, unfortunately, the old county if we are not careful and don't manage this going forward or get support from national government. But that's in the future. So does the Executive believe that the proposed 4% increase for our hard-working staff, who's went through quite a bit in the last 2 years, is enough, and would they reconsider putting further resources in next year's budget to ensure if it does go above that, which I believe it should, given the difficulties that everyone is facing in these terrible days just now, the cost of living, the cost of everything. So would the Executive consider re-looking at that and at least maybe putting more resources into that? And how does the Executive feel knowing that we have about 50% vacancy rate for social care workers? I mean, that's quite horrendous in reality, isn't it? Do we feel we have enough resources moving forward in the next year to try and reduce that? Because the cost of agency staff, as I've raised many times, is absolutely horrendous. So does the Executive feel they're doing enough to try and remedy that in the year going forward? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McGee. I just want to reassure you again, I know the budget moving forward is challenging, but we have some very experienced individuals around the table who will absolutely ensure we do everything we can to issue a balanced budget moving forward. It's our responsibility to do that, and as you know, it's our legal obligation to have a balanced budget, and that's what we will achieve. I just wanted to make that quite clear to you. I would now like to invite Councillor Lloyd Bundy, Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the 22nd of December last year, I introduced to this Executive the draft budget for 2023 to 24 and the medium-term financial plan. After your approval, the consultation started and ran until the 27th of January. As I said in December, residents, local partners and other stakeholders will have the opportunity to review proposed budget and the proposed budget and provide feedback. During this period, some 449 responses to the consultation were received. May I take this opportunity to thank all those who took time to contribute. Appendix E of this report summarises the feedback received, and 58.4% of respondents who answered the question excuse me, on increasing council tax disagreed with the increase, and 33.9% of respondents agreed that council tax should be increased. That left a further 110 either stating that they didn't know or declined to answer. I trust that members have read the appendix, as it gives a very detailed summary of the responses for our residents. It also goes into detail as to how the consultation was conducted. Several comments that were made during the consultation were that we were not a listening council. I would refute this. We do listen, and where prudent, this Executive will revise, review, and even remove proposals. That does not mean that we will shy away from making difficult decisions, however unpopular they may be. During the consultation period, each part of the draft budget has been subject to scrutiny by the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee by Directorate. Their observations are included in Appendix G. Earlier, we heard from the chair of this committee. Today, this Executive is requested to set out its recommendations to full council at the meeting on the 23rd of February of the proposed budget for 2023-24 in consideration of the results of the consultation and the deliberations of the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. As I have said, on many occasions, the consultation included elected members as well, whether they be from the majority Conservative group or the minority groups represented on this council. With this in mind, I welcome the input from the Green Alliance who wrote to me setting out their thoughts. I would also like to thank those members of this Executive who took time to respond to those areas that were pertaining to their portfolio. I personally wrote to the leader of the Green Alliance setting out the thoughts of my colleagues. This underlines that this budget is the responsibility of every directorate of this council. Indeed, Appendix A is the budget summary, but Appendix B is the budget change proposals by department setting out the savings and pressures. Since publication of this report, the final finance settlement was published last Monday, which saw a modest £95,000 of increased funding. It is proposed to add this to our contingency. This proposed budget is not something that has been arrived at overnight. It is the culmination of months of hard work. During September, each directorate entered into capital programme challenge sessions, asking each directorate to revisit their capital plans and aspirations for the coming years, with the desired outcome to review each one as at its deliverability and profiling. This exercise gave us a better forecast of planned borrowing and serviceability of funding for the general fund going forward. The details of this is for the capital programme report, which will follow later in this meeting. During the first week of November, each directorate embarked upon a budget challenge session, with each offering economies, savings and sharing their challenges that they envisage over the next year and into the medium term. The forecasts for this were based upon the results of the financial year 2021-22 and the forecasts as at period 6 of the year 2022-23. Later on in November, each directorate was subject to scrutiny review for the year's forecast as at period 6. So in summary, so far this budget proposal that I am presenting today has been subject to over 8 hours capital projects challenge sessions, 13 hours budget challenge sessions, and over 15 hours of period 6 in-year scrutiny, and a further 10 hours of scrutiny sessions by directorate during the consultation period last month. Outside of these meetings and sessions, there have been more hours of work spent shaping this budget into the document that we have today. This first report focuses on the General Fund and also notes the planned use of the Dedicated Schools Grant, which is a ring-fence grant allocated to this authority by the government to support a range of educational-related services. The Department of Education currently operates a 4-block funding model for funding schools and pre-16 education, including early years. The level of funding received for North Northamptonshire Council is set out in the chart at Appendix C and a paragraph 1.3. It amounts to just shy of £355 million. Appendix C sets out in detail the background of the DSG and how the Department of Education arrives at their funding. It also sets out the pressures and risks that children's education poses to this council, predominantly in the rise of special educational needs and disability demands. Appendix D sets out the council's reserve strategy. It is a statutory requirement for this council to hold reserves at a level needed for meeting estimated future expenditure. Indeed, Section 114 of the Local Government Finance Act 1988 requires the Chief Finance Officer to report to the Council if there is likely to be unlawful expenditure or an imbalanced budget. This would include situations where the reserves have become seriously depleted. SIPFA and the Local Authority Accounting Panel do not accept that there is a case for introducing a generally acceptable minimum level of reserves for councils, and councils, on the advice of the Chief Finance Officer, should make their own judgment as to the levels of reserves they hold. In assessing the appropriate levels of reserves, a well-managed organisation will ensure that the reserves are not only adequate, but also necessary. I do not need to remind members that we are a very young council that will continue to face financial pressures, besides our demand-led services and the challenges that they bring. A year ago, I said that we were living in unprecedented times. Little did we know that we would emerge from the challenging times of the pandemic and lockdown and then be hit by further events, both on a global and national level, that would present new challenges and inflation levels that we haven't seen for many years. Setting a contingency and holding healthy reserves will help us mitigate what is before us. Some reserves are held to meet forthcoming events, contingency to meet unexpected events, smoothing of peaks and troughs in expenditures, working balance to mitigate uneven cash flow, and a general reserve to mitigate risk. During the first week of November, this directorate embarked upon a budget challenge sessions with each offering... Sorry, I think I've gone the wrong way. The Council also holds a number of earmarked reserves held for specific purposes. It should be recognised that reserves are non-recurring. If a reserve is spent, it is gone. A well-managed council should always plan for the replenishment of any depleted reserves. Appendix H in the Treasury Management Strategy is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, Minimum Revenue Provision Statement, and Annual Investment Strategy. Treasury Management is the management of the authority's cash flows, borrowing and investments and associated risks. This authority has borrowed and invested substantial sums of money and is therefore exposed to financial risks, including the loss of invested funds and the revenue effect of changing interest rates. The successful identification, monitoring and control of financial risks are therefore sent to this authority's prudential financial management. The table at 3.1 summarises the balance sheet and forecast for the financial year through to 2026. The revenue account of this council has 5 main income sources: which are council tax, business rates, government grants, fees and charges, and where necessary, the use of reserves. It is imperative that this council does everything possible to maintain and grow local resources that are within its control. It is very clear that the assumption of government is that the councils will set council tax to the maximum. Council tax revenue is the most stable form of income that this council has. And although we have a balanced budget for 23-24, we are forecasting a budgetary gap of nearly £18 million 24-25, rising to nearly £54 million by 25-26. By not raising council tax, we would forgo £36 million over the medium term. And assuming that the referendum cap returns to last year's levels, this figure will rise to in excess of £70 million over the same period if we held council tax at last year's levels. It should be noted that NNC is in the bottom third of unitary councils when comparing Band D council tax. It should also be noted that the majority of properties within North Northants are Band A, which will result in an increase of £1 and 1 penny per week. Not raising council tax would inevitably put at risk this council's sustainable future, plunging this part of Northamptonshire back into the very dark days of Northamptonshire County Council. Appendix I sets out the legal background to setting a revenue budget and council tax. The final Appendix J out to the revised strategy for flexible use of capital receipts. In December 2021, the government announced a 3-year extension from 2022-23 onwards of the existing flexibility for councils to use capital receipts to fund transformation projects that produce long-term savings and reduce the cost of service delivery. The table at 5.1 identifies projects that are potentially eligible. This budget will underpin the priorities contained within this council's corporate plan. In December, when I presented this budget as a draft to go forward for consultation, I said that I cannot foresee any reasonable argument for full council to accept any amendments to this recommendation on the day of the meeting, if they were not brought forward during the consultation period. Indeed, any such amendment proposals must be perceived as political showboating or plying the electorate for votes. Sadly, it is inevitable that amendments will be brought. But may I remind members that this proposed budget, to be successful, will require the buy-in of every member, officer, employee and partner of North Northants Council. It is offered not as the aspirations of the Finance Department, but as the intentions of each directorate and as such the whole Council. I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Bundy, for that very in-depth report, and congratulations to your team and that for putting that together. So I'd like to look at members now for some debate on this matter, and I know Councillor Harrison wanted to speak. So over to you, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a couple of things. Firstly, in response to Councillor McGee's point about 50% vacancies in adult social care, I'd just like to explain that a little bit more, if I could, in that it's slightly misleading. The vacancies are being held over due to the transformation consultation. It wouldn't make much sense to be recruiting people to posts that may not exist in a couple of months' time and might change considerably. And another part of that strategy, should it go ahead, is that we would be able to increase salaries for the people working in those new services. So just wanted to, you should see a change in that if and when we implement that strategy. And then secondly, I just wanted to also say how delighted I am that despite a really difficult budget setting period, we have shown the importance that we place on adult social care with significantly increased budgets. And I think that's a testament to this council and where our priorities lie. So I would like to thank the finance team for being able to find money in the budget for some of our most vulnerable people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bunday, for setting out that report, which I thoroughly welcome. As you set out, there has been extensive scrutiny looking at this over the year, and it's not just something that's come forward over the last few months. And I know that we come here each month and go through it in detail, but that is really the tip of the iceberg in terms of how much work goes into this. It is really pleasing to see that it is in a balanced position again, that we're continuing to deliver on the services for local residents despite the tricky circumstances on a broader scale. But also, as you go through that documentation, you can see that we're also delivering on our priorities, again, for example, in relation to sustainable, more green environment, whilst really focusing as well on those statutory services that we absolutely have to get right. So, you know, there's difficult challenges. They will always be there, but I'm confident that we are doing everything we can to make sure we're delivering for local residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pentland. Any other comments from executive members? Councillor Harris, Howe, sorry. Too many Helens.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we'll all appreciate with what's going on nationally and internationally that times are really, really tough for everybody, and we do have to make some really, really difficult decisions. From my area, in particularly, you know, utility costs when we look at all of our leisure services and, you know, swimming pools and facilities like that. We are doing everything we can to make sure that we are able to provide those services to our residents. But in the future, I'm sure there are going to be some very difficult decisions have to be made, and let's hope that things get better in the future and we're able to keep going with all of our services. Nobody likes to make cuts to anybody. Nobody would vote to put their council tax up, I'm sure, but we all have to be in it together, and we all have to bear some of the burden. So it's unfortunate, but we are where we are, and we have to make sure we have that balanced budget. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Sorry, Councillor Orman, are you looking to speak? Yep.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to welcome the investment of £68 million in place and economy, which is a £12 million increase in the investment. Obviously, this is one of the departments that's quite affected by the rises in fuel costs, and of course the pressures in homeschool transport are well rehearsed, but it's pleasing to see that we have been able to get more children assessed for the EHCPs, but that's had a knock-on effect with more SEND travel required. And I think the paragraph 7.43 onwards gives a very good comment on that. So we continue to invest, which has been... I'll refer to the consultation that's part of the paper, and I noticed that potholes form quite a considerable thing, a part of the consultation responses, but that's exactly why we've just spent £1.5 million investment plan into the roads in potholes, vegetation, clearing lines, and that process is ongoing, and hopefully people will see a much better outlook on that. I'd like to thank officers for all the hard work that they put in finance and in the place and economy and achieving this budget. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Orman, thank you very much for your words. I just wanted to address the vacancy issue, which has cropped up again, and it's just worth noting that the LGA have just done a piece of work recently which addresses the national issues for local authorities that are struggling to recruit into the sector for various challenges and reasons. So it's not a unique issue we have here in Northamptonshire. It's a national picture, and I'm sure with the various bodies such as the LGA working to sort of try and ease the position, that we will get to a good place. Now, we are here in Northamptonshire are embarking upon a whole piece of work to look at how we manage vacancy levels and so on. So, I'm satisfied that we should start to see recruitment up, vacancy levels coming down, etc., and it to be a more balanced horizon as we move forward. So I just wanted to add that in. Now, I would like to go back to Councillor Bundy to settle, to sum up, and I know Councillor Bundy has already moved the report, and we will go to the vote after.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment on 2 points. First of all, the fact that the medium-term financial situation is that we have an £18 million budget gap that will go up to £54 million. So I will be encouraging everybody around this table to pull whatever levers they possibly can to mitigate that. And the other thing that I'd like to highlight is that when we had the report from the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Chair, I was the only person who didn't contribute, and that excites me because it just shows that this budget is the take-in of absolutely every member of this executive, and as such, every single directorate that is represented by this council. So the fact that I remain silent actually excites me rather than disappoints me.
Well, Councillor Bundy, I don't see much difference between your excited face and your normal face, but we won't go there. But I note you moved the report to start with. Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Howe, thank you very much. And that's been moved and seconded. The recommendations are set out on page 79 and 80 of the agenda pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Fantastic. I think we will now break for a quick 10-minute comfort break, and we can come back straight. Look at item agenda 8, and that's the Housing Revenue Account HRA Draft Budget 2023 to 24 and the medium-term financial position proposals. And I'd like to invite Councillor Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting. Councillor Buckingham, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you very much and good morning. As in the vein of what Councillor Bundy has just said about asking questions, I think I wanted a little bit of clarity on some of the things within this. So there were a couple on the general things. So I wondered why leaseholders aren't mentioned as part of the HRA, because they are our long-term tenants. Also can't understand why service charges aren't being increased in Corby for the next 4 or 5 years, which just wondered why. And within the budget there are certain things that I'm unclear on. So some help on those would be really good. Hidden homes. Have we found a Hobbit village somewhere that we need to bring up to standard? Unsure what hidden homes is. Also, there is a thing called compliance within the capital budget. And Decent Homes Programme. Kettering doesn't seem to have a Decent Homes Programme, but Corby does. So it's just understanding why those things are not a little bit clearer. And they need to be, so that I can then go to Councillor Bundy and ask him for some changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buckingham. And I'm sure, if not Councillor Bundy will address those points, the executive member will when I come to the members' debate part of the discussion. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Bundy to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. In answer to a couple of your points, and I'm sure Councillor Binley will probably elaborate, but I do believe leaseholders' income is actually in the HRA and is included in the HRA. And also, I think the service charge not being increased is not going forward. I believe that's going backwards, that Corby didn't increase service charges for many years. But the other points I will leave Councillor Binley to comment on later on. The purpose of this report is to present the proposed housing revenue budget and medium-term financial plan to Executive. This was presented in draft in December. Council tenants were consulted via a target consultation and their respective tenant advisory panels. The HRA does not directly impact on the Council's wider general fund budget or on the level of council tax. Income to the HRA is primarily received through the rents and other charges paid by tenants and leaseholders. Northamptonshire is required to run a single housing revenue account, but for a short time is operating 2 neighbourhood accounts to reflect stock holdings from the 2 legacy borough councils of Kettering and Corby. The council has started to move towards consolidating these 2 accounts into a single HRA. This work requires a 30-year business plan that will be informed by the housing strategy for Northamptonshire that is currently being developed and will be reported to members during 2023-24. The housing revenue account is a separate ring-fenced account within the council for the income and expenditure associated with its housing stock. Government guidelines for rent increases were introduced in 2020 and were intended to run for 5 years to 2025. This formula to maintain service provision and continued investment was CPI plus 1%. Members will recall that this followed 4 years of a 1% per year reduction, which cost the HRA around about £130 million over the period of the business plan. When this current policy was set, CPI was running at 2%. CPI in July 2022 was 10.1%, meaning that rent increases for the next April would have been 11.1%. After consultancy, it was announced that by the Chancellor in September that social housing rent increases for 23-24 would be capped at 7%. In line with previous years, the proposed increase in rent for both neighbourhood accounts will be the maximum permitted, i.e. 7%, which will help maintain and protect levels of service. Taking into account this increase, the draft neighbourhood accounts for 23-24 show a balanced position. The proposed new rent levels are reflected in the table at paragraph 2.10. The medium-term position shows the Corby account in deficit and the Kettering account in surplus. This is as a result of how the self-financing of the loans were structured. The medium-term position also assumes a rental increase of 4% per annum. North Northamptonshire own 8,160 properties ranging from 1 and 4 bed houses, bungalows and flats, combined with a further 893 leasehold properties. This amounts to a projected rental income in excess of £35 million. A breakdown of the types of properties can be found in paragraph 4.2. The Council is required by law to avoid budgeting for a deficit on the HRA, so the budget must not be based on the total HRA revenue reserves falling below zero. In practice, the Council is expected to maintain a reasonable balance of HRA reserves to cover contingencies. The Chief Finance Officer reviews the level of balances required to support the housing revenue account spend annually as part of the risk assessment of the budget. The Executive Director for Finance and Performance has assessed that the minimum level of balance, taking all known risks into account, should remain unchanged at £800,000 for the Corby neighbourhood account and £650,000 for the Kettering neighbourhood account. The minimum balance for the two neighbourhood accounts are around 4% of the total budget. Details of the reserves, together with any estimated movements, are set out in Appendix C. Numbers of right-to-buy properties and the number of empty properties must also be taken into account. The number of right-to-buy sales assumed during 23-24 and the medium term, and for the medium term for Corby neighbourhood account is 50 and for the Kettering neighbourhood account is 30. Void levels are assumed at 0.9% for Corby and 1.5% for Kettering. Paragraph 4.12 to 4.15 sets out the government right-to-buy scheme and the changes during the pandemic. The current economic climate has made provision of new social housing challenges. It is envisaged a further 18 homes will be added to the Corby stock at Cheltenham Road during 23-24. Further schemes will be reflected in the medium-term financial plan when there is more certainty around the time delivery of future housing schemes. Paragraphs 422 to 428 set out the Council's approach to the self-financing of two neighbourhood accounts, which explains how the Council holds a depreciation charge which is then used to support the capital programme. Holding social housing stock does come with risk. Paragraphs 2.29 to 4.3 sets out the Council's provision for bad debt due to rent arrears. Finally, paragraphs 4.31 to 4.33 reflects the cost of employment within the HRA. Again, I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bundy. Members, Councillor Binley.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Bundy and the team for, again, absolutely sterling work on this. Councillor Bundy's made it absolutely clear the plan that we have to address things such as the backlog of repair. I know that I've said it before to this committee, but of course it's an issue that we inherited. It's not apportioning blame at any of the previous sovereign councils by any stretch. Of course, it's the unprecedented circumstances that they experienced during COVID, and we now have to address that backlog like many other social housing providers who have exactly the same issue as we do. However, we've set out those clear and ambitious plans to address that backlog of repairs, to provide the service that we absolutely aspire to provide to the residents of North Northamptonshire. I will now, Chair, just go on and comment on the points that Councillor Buckingham raised. First of all, about leaseholders not being mentioned. They are mentioned in the report. I mean, of course, Councillor Buckingham, we can pick this up separately, but they're mentioned in 4.2 and 4.17, just to name a couple of places that they are mentioned in there. Because in 4.2, I wanted it absolutely crystal clear what number of leaseholders we got versus what number of normal social housing tenants we had. Service charges not increasing in Corby. Yes, you're absolutely right. They've not increased in Corby in the last decade. That is a legacy issue that we inherited from the previous sovereign authority. It is an issue that I have raised with the team, and one that we have to unpick, in that the team are looking at addressing that issue when we move to one single neighbourhood account, and we have to revise our leaseholder agreement with those individuals, because rather than the agreement being based on what the forecasted charges are and based on the previous charges from the prior year, like most leaseholder agreements, that is not in place with Corby, whereas it is in place with Kettering. So that is something that concerned me. But unfortunately, we cannot address that right at this point in time. We have to address that through formal agreements. You raised about hidden homes. What are they? Whether they're something from Lord of the Rings, etc. They're not. That is something, again, that's something that we got from the days of Corby Borough Council, whereby what they were doing, they were looking at certain housing, and the example used is, a kind of strange layout, masonette, etc., and where it can actually, is better off being split into two homes. That's why it's called hidden home. So it's where the housing has been reviewed and it's actually a different layout would suit it better, because somebody's done a slightly stranger architectural design. But of course the good news on that is you will see that that is not then followed forward in the MTFP for future years, because having discussed it with the team, that work is basically finished and will be wound up this coming financial year. Compliance, I can answer the compliance side for you. That is basically for anything outside of other work such as electricals, asbestos, etc. It gives us that work inside the budget. For example, as we know, the government introduced the requirement to have CO2 alarms inside properties. It's to cover pieces like that, so that don't fall within those other areas within the capital budget. You raised the Decent Homes programme is in Corby but not in Kettering. No, you're absolutely right. And the reason for that is the team have done an awful lot of work on the capital budget side of things this year to make sure that there is as aligned as possible, ready for that transition from the two neighbourhood accounts. Whilst we have a single HRA, we still have those two neighbourhood accounts. And the team have aligned those things in sort of 90% there, ready for the accounts to be put together. You will note that Homes for the Future doesn't have anything in Corby this year. That's because in Corby it was called Decent Homes, in Kettering it was called Homes for the Future. You will note that on the MTFP that transition starts next year. You will see that there is spend in there for the following financial year, ready to start that transition over. It's just because there were two different names for the programmes. Another prime example of that would be, contained within the capital spend, is a programme that used to be known as Sparkle in Kettering. Nothing existed in Corby with regards to sheltered housing, communal upgrades, so on the programme it's now called Sheltered Housing Communal Upgrades, but that was previously known as Sparkle, and we've introduced that into Corby to make sure that we are upgrading those communal areas within sheltered accommodation, where again those have been significantly underinvested in for a long period of time. And I think, Councillor Buckingham, that answers everything, but of course, more than happy to pick up anything else really offline. Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased with the work, and I just really want to say thank you again to Councillor Bunday and the team for all of their hard work put into this.
Thank you, Councillor Binley, and thank you for your extensive reply. Now, Councillor Bunday, did you want to come back on any of that or move the report?
Just to say, Chair, that I think we've got to be alive to the fact that the 7% rent increase is still lower than inflation, and every penny of the rent goes into the upkeep of the properties. So as a consequence, we've got to be alive to that. And as I said, with the general fund, pulling every lever possible to get income in to make sure that we have a council in every single area which is the best council, then we've just got to be aware of the fact that we are below inflation there with the increase. But I'm happy to move the...
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Can I look for someone to second that? Okay, Councillor Binley. So there's a mover and a seconder, and the recommendations are on page 294 of the agenda pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 9, the capital programme for 2023-26, and I would like to invite Councillor Bunday to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the baseline capital programme for 2023 to 24 and the indicative medium-term financial plan for North Northamptonshire Council. This programme was considered by the Executive on the 22nd of December 22 and became part of the wider budget proposal that was consulted on last month. It presents the General Fund Capital Programme, the Baseline Development Pool and the Housing Revenue Account Capital Programme for 2023 through to 2026. Appendix E of item 7, Appendix E and item 7 earlier in this meeting and section 6.4 of this report sets out in detail the results of that consultation. As I referred to earlier, during September, each directorate entered into capital programme challenge sessions, asking each directorate to revisit their capital plans and aspirations for the coming year, with the desired outcome to review each one to its deliverability and profiling. This exercise gave us a better forecast of planned borrowing and serviceability of funding for the general fund going forward. As a result of these sessions, £43.8 million of underspend and slippage from previous years has been reviewed and reprofiled into the capital programme or development pool of the general fund for 23-24. The table of paragraph 6.4.2 summarises this. In this report, the key principles underpinning the current capital programme are set out, which will ensure that the Council delivers a capital programme that is affordable and sustainable. Paragraph 5.2 outlines these. Again, can I refer members to the Treasury Management Strategy for 23-24 that is at Appendix A of item 7. The total capital programme is £109.1 million, consisting of General Fund £65.4 million, which includes key projects such as Corby Town Fund, school improvements and extensions, highway schemes and various property and environmental projects across North Northants, and the HRA capital programme totalling £43.7 million across Kettering and Corby housing stock, together with significant investment of nearly £7.5 million proposed for the housing development and new build programme. There is also a development pool of £190.2 million, which includes schemes awaiting formal business cases. These three programmes are reported in detail in Appendices A, B and C of this report. The minimum revenue provision reflects the minimum amount of a council must charge to the revenue budget each year to set aside a provision for repaying the external borrowing. This increase in the MRP provision of £1.549 million for 23-24 is to ensure the provision is aligned to the MRP policy in our Treasury Management Strategy. Members are reminded that the disaggregation of the capital assets, balances and debt are still to be finalised and subject to audit for 2021 financial accounts for Northamptonshire County Council. As is the audit of Corby Borough Council, both of these may have implications for the current assumptions. Also, the Public Loan Board no longer lend to local authorities that plan to buy commercial assets primarily for yield. Northant's draft capital strategy for 23-24 is included at Appendix D. I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. And I'd like to go to Councillor David Brackenbury, who wanted to talk on this item.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think everybody in this room will appreciate the hard work of the finance team and yourself, Councillor Bunday, on this paper and indeed on the preceding papers as well. And I just, it's such an enormous piece of work doing the budget, and I just think it should be, universally recognised. In terms of the capital programme, I welcome some of the ambitious projects in the development pool. I also welcome the fact that business cases are being developed on many of these projects so that suitable bids can be put in for external funding to support some of the schemes that are being considered. There will, as we know, be future rounds of the Levelling Up Fund, which this council will be enthusiastically bidding for. And then there are funding streams such as the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and other streams which we will be looking to allocate as soon as we can get these business cases put together. So all in all, very much welcome the capital programme and through you, Chair, again, very much appreciate the wider piece of work done by the whole finance team and yourself, Councillor Bunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier I spoke about delivering on the priorities that this council has set out, and I think this capital programme does that again, particularly if you look at sustainable green environment. There are a number of bits in the capital programme that relate to this, and some you may not think do on the surface, but they do throughout it. So, for example, the Corby Town Fund, the Sixth Form College, and the work that will be doing. But also, just to pick up on one, the Treescape funding, which is a very significant amount of funding when you look at it, that has been brought into the council, that will do great work in terms of planting more trees and regenerating woodland locally. So please support this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pentland. Councillor Bunday, did you just want to sum up?
Yeah, two things. First of all, I'd like to say I am just the messenger, and there's a fabulous finance team that is behind my message, who have done the work, and I'd like to thank them because I think they've done a sterling job. And the other thing I'd like to say is that if you actually add up the amount of finance that we've talked about today and look at it in the medium-term picture, we are talking about many billions of pounds, and that is not a small amount to be ignored. With that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Muddy. And yes, the team, Janice, Claire and Mark and all the other unsung heroes in the financial gurus of this council, this is their time to shine, and this is a very busy time for that team. And I know I quite often get late emails from Janice. She's clearly burning the 2 a.m. oil. I'll extend it past the midnight oil, but thank you, and we need to put that on record as an executive how grateful we are for the fantastic support that the finance team give at this time of the year. Okay, so the report has been moved by Councillor Bunday, so I'm looking at Councillor David Brackenbury is seconding the report. The recommendations are set out on page 294 of the agenda pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Fantastic. Okay, so we now move on to item 10, which is the Barnwell Neighbourhood Plan proposed adoption, and I would like to invite Councillor Brackenbury to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's nice, perhaps, to go to a smaller item, but smaller but still remarkably important. Barnwell, the village in our ward, in our Thrapston ward, has worked very hard. They've put a neighbourhood plan together. I think, as everybody is aware, neighbourhood plans form part of a local development framework. It gives the village and that community the idea of how they set out their requirements for planning and development, and it forms part of the suite of planning policy documentation by which any planning application is considered. I'd like to thank everybody in Barnwell for the hard work in getting this plan ready for submission. They're not easy things to do. We now have a suite of neighbourhood plans covering much of North Northamptonshire, which is very much to be welcomed. We do have to take into consideration in our local development framework some communities which do not have neighbourhood plans, and so they must be protected with the wider Part 2 and overarching Part 1 development plans as they come forward. But nevertheless, it's extremely satisfactory that Barnwell and the community have put this plan together. It's been submitted to the Planning Inspectorate. It was adjudged sound. It was then submitted to public referendum in Barnwell and was enthusiastically endorsed. So, with my thanks to the people of Barnwell, I move the recommendations that the Barnwell plan be made in the recommendation in 3.1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. We got there in the end, didn't we? So it has been moved. Can I have a seconder for the Barnwell neighbourhood plan, please? Councillor Howe, thank you very much. The recommendations are on page 364 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. So we move on. Urgent items of business. I can confirm there has been no requests to address the meeting for urgent items of business. So that concludes the meeting today, and I thank everyone who's turned up today, and especially officers and members of the public and our online viewing community as well. And with that, the meeting's closed. Thank you.